this is Ross, and super excited because I'm going to be doing the giveaway right in front of you guys at the end of the video. So you'll know who's going to win at the end of the video, and if you want to see that, you can skip to the end right now. But first, I thought I would show you guys how I prune my fig trees, and I wanted to talk about it a little bit first, and then I'm going to show you guys quite a few examples I have, and you know what I've done to those trees. And then at the very end, I'll answer some of your guys' questions, because there was a lot of response. Really happy to see a lot of nice things that people said. It really means a lot. But yeah, so on to the pruning of the fig trees. Really, I think pruning anything, you just have to know what you're going to do with it first. Okay, that's the most important thing. Take out a lot. If you're reluctant to prune, I would take out more than what you actually think. I think that's a good piece of advice. You know, you can't really prune too much. You know, when you're pruning, you want a permanent structure that you can always come back to, something that's at a reasonable height. And then you also want to consider, you know, what's the style of tree that you want? You know, if it is a tree, do you want a tree or do you want a bush? You know, I think aesthetics are important to consider, but also production of your fruit tree or fruit bush or whatever it is. You know, it's important. Certain things, you can only prune them certain ways to get the maximum production. I think figs are a little bit lenient in that, but I think if you're growing them in containers or even in the ground, I think it's important to know the limits of your tree. What do I mean by that? If you're growing in a container, your tree's limited. It can only get so big. Your tree can only get so big. The root mass can only get so big. You can only give it so many nutrients. It's just limited. So you need to recognize that when it's at that limited point, and bring it, you know, root prune it, and then prune the top growth so that you're bringing it back to a desired height, or kind of just refreshing the cycle of the tree. You don't want too much top growth for the limited amount of root growth. That's just the basic rule of pruning. You know, you always want to balance from the top to the bottom, and you also on the top you want to balance the whole top. You know, the tree shouldn't be leaning one direction or have so much growth on the right side versus the left side. You know, you want it to have a nice shape to it. And I think with fig trees, I think there's a lot of misinformation out there when it comes to production, the maximum amount of production. Now there's two different goals people could have in mind, which are maximum production for common figs, like the main crop, depending where you live, or maximum amount of production for the Breva crop, which is the first crop of the year. So those are, you know, two things you also have to consider when determining your pruning cuts. Increasing production from the main crop, I think, is probably the most overlooked, the most misunderstood. And I think, you know, I'm not claiming to be an expert on this, but I've done a lot of research. I ask a lot of questions. I've bugged the shit out of people. So I've asked the experts, and I found some kind of not a hard and fast rule just yet, but what I've discovered is that depending on the strength of your tree, the root mass of your tree, maybe the amount of sunlight it gets, you should only have so many fruiting branches on a fig tree. Now, if you have a tree shape and you have many branches coming out, those still count as fruiting branches. So not just trunks coming up. That, you know, so a single trunk or a single branch, a single tip, I should say a single tip, a single growth tip is a fruiting branch. because every node on a fig tree should be producing a leaf and a fig. And if that's not happening with your tree, something's wrong. And I think largely it's probably due to pruning. It may also be due to light, fertilizing, or water, but I think pruning can definitely help. This is one part of the puzzle, okay? So, like I said, depending on the strength of your tree, your root system, and the sun, you know, you don't want necessarily so many growth tips. What I've been using for my trees is that I only want 3 fruiting branches for a 5-gallon tree. A 5-gallon tree they don't get that large, and not only do they not get that large, but the root system is pretty limited. If you're growing a fig tree in a root pouch, a grow bag, that's different as well. Maybe if I had a 5-gallon root bag, I could probably up that to 4 growing tips. What I mean by a tip is just where the leaf comes out of. That's a tip. That's a growth tip. On every fig tree, there's always growing points. Some people, I've seen a lot of people's trees, I've gotten a lot of people's trees, and they have a lot of growing points, a lot of growing tips on their trees, and that's not good, because that limits your production. The tree is then focusing on producing leaves rather than fruit. We're growing fruit. We're not growing vegetation when it comes to fruit trees. You know, in the beginning of the season, you want your tree to have as many leaves as possible, as quick as possible, because then you're going to get as many fruit as possible. You know, you want to give it the early nitrogen in the beginning of the season, and then once it starts growing figs, you want to switch over to phosphorus. You know, and you don't really want as much vegetative growth. You want all that to be focusing on the figs and forming the figs and making sure that they're properly ripened. So that's kind of the end of my rant. I could probably go on for this for a while, but I want to show you guys how I'm pruning my trees. But I want you to keep in mind production when you're pruning your fig trees, and keep in mind production when you're looking at my trees as well. All right, so here we go. So here's a couple examples. Let's start over here. This is my one of my Marseille's Black VS tree. It has 4 tips here. This tree I'm giving to my uncle, and I'm going to put it in the ground for him. So I really don't want to touch this, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to bury the trunk as deep as I humanly possibly can, so that only this top growth is sticking out. And this will just ensure that every year it comes back from the roots, in case it dies back. So I'm not really going to touch this, but what I will do is I'll take off these tips. I will take off these tips. And you know, the tips are not a huge deal. It's just that I think that taking off those tips is just increasing the health of the plant. You should be doing some kind of pruning to your trees every year. Now, when I take off these tips, what happens is it's going to start branching out in all directions. So you have to be careful that come springtime, you don't want too many growing tips. This right here, what tree is this? This is my Italian black tree. Now I owe someone cuttings from this tree. So it has a beautiful form as it is. This is perfect. You know, you really have to know what you want to do with the tree first before you decide where to prune it. This is a nice structure here. I got 1 branch coming up, another branch coming up, another branch coming up. That's 3 for a maximum of 3 in a 5-gallon container. If you had a 10-gallon container, I could say you could go with 4 or 5. You can get away with 4 or 5. But you don't want to get carried away. And what's happening here is that I pinched earlier in the year, and they're putting out new growth tips. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut these out. So there's only 1. Same thing over here. I'm going to cut this out over here, and I'm going to cut this out over here. If I could do this with the phone, with the camera in my hand. Okay. And then I'll take some cuttings when I'm done this video for my friend. This right here, this is my Kathleen's black tree. Started from cutting. By the way, this was started from cutting as well. My Italian black tree. And you can see the difference. You know, there's 3 growing tips versus 1. And now, this just depends on what you want to do with it, you know. I pinched way down here, okay, which induced this branching, okay. Now with this tree, my Kathleen's black tree, I didn't do that. I just let it grow up as high as I wanted it to. So now I think it's time to prune this thing. So what I've done already is I've pruned it off. And now what's going to happen next year is that it's going to send out a branch from here, on the other side, back here, and right here, another node. Okay, so far I haven't really done that much pruning. What you want to be careful of is the sap when you prune. I don't know if you can see that too well, but there's sap dripping from this. And this sap is you can be very allergic to it. Some people are not. Historically, I have not been allergic to it, but I left some sap in my hand for, I guess, a little bit too long. And I got a huge blister, and it was painful, and it didn't go away for a long time. In fact, there's a scar there on my hand. So please, when you're pruning fig trees, wear gloves or wash your hands, take a Benadryl. All right, next tree. This right here is my Miller's brown turkey tree. And what I'm doing with this tree, I haven't fully decided yet, but I think I'm going to use this as rootstock. I have 2 of these. So one of them I may use as rootstock, the other one I will keep as a tree for fruiting. So this tree, I don't know what I'm gonna do with it yet, so I'm not gonna touch it. But if I were gonna prune this thing, it has a nice form to it. It has a branch down here. If I wanted to air layer this, I could keep this. If not, it has 1, 2, 3 growing tips. So this tree is doing well. Now there's also some debate. You know, you could just do what you want with these trees. You could have them all be trees, tree form. You could have them as bush form. It's all up to you, okay? This is another tree form here. This is a standard. I topped it off here, and then it sent out 2 branches, okay? And it's doing pretty well. What I'm afraid of is that I want another branch to come out. This is my LSU Scots Black. It's a keeper. I'm not grafting it. This tree will be in my collection probably for a long time. So deciding what I want to do with it is important right now. It's quite tall for it. This is its first year. It started out as a cutting, and I think I want to bring it down slightly. And I'm not sure if I need cuttings from this one. It could be, I'll have to double check, but I need a 3rd growth tip at some point. So what I'll do is, I'm gonna take off some growth here. There's too much growth, so I'm gonna cut it off here. This is about 9-10 inches or so of growth. Cut that off. And the same thing over here. Now, something to know is that when you prune your trees, there's nodes, okay? The highest node is going to be the strongest growth coming out of the gate when they wake up from dormancy. And I just pruned this tree in a way that this node is going to be sending its growth in the direction that I don't really want it to go in. So I'm going to take out another node here. I'm going to bring it down 1 more node. And now on the other side, the other branch, let's see, what do I want to do here? Same thing. Bring it down in height. And that's it. Just focusing on bringing my the height of the trees down, or in some cases, like this tree, like I showed you, my Kathleen's black tree, getting it to the height that I want it at. Now, I just took these cuttings, labeled them, okay? Do not forget to label your trees, your cuttings, because you're not going to know what the hell you just did. So take some time right now and label them. All right, so I have 2 more trees left to show you guys, and then I'll be done. This is my Canadria tree. As you can see, there's a pruning cut I made right here before I started this video. So now I have 1, 2, 3 tips. But what I want to do is I want to come in here, take out the tips. And I'm going to bring this down, I think, as well. And now we have the classic bush form, as you can tell. Now this is a graft I put on. This graft on sometime in the fall, and it hasn't really done anything, but that's kind of good. This is kind of an experiment. I wanted to see if this will actually take come springtime. I have no idea what's going to happen with this. And I also have it air layered, you can see, so that I can take it off very easily. Okay, so this is my Hank's brown turkey tree. This is the same thing, I believe, as my Miller's brown turkey. They're the same thing. Both essentially a southern brown turkey. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to just take out some growth. Keep it low. If I don't keep this thing low, it's going to get out of control for the size of this container. So that's what I'll do. I'll just take this out here. This I can use as a cutting. So I just took this off from here. This is about 15, 16 inches of growth. But you know, you got to do it. You got to do what you got to do. And take this off as well. Off this one tree, a first year tree, essentially, I've taken off almost at least 30 inches in growth, 40 inches of growth. Something I haven't touched on is San Pedro varieties. All the figs I previously pruned were common figs, and I'm pruning them for main crop production. But some figs, like Fiorone di Ruvo, this guy right here, is a San Pedro fig, and the main crop will not ripen here because I do not have the wasp, the fig wasp. So there's a certain way you have to prune San Pedro figs. And I think it's important to establish a permanent structure, especially when you're pruning San Pedro figs. The reason for this is because you don't want the tree getting too big. So right now, this tree is in a very good state. I have 2 branches coming out here of a main trunk. You can see that. Let me see if I can turn this around slightly. Yeah, okay. So there's 2 here. And what I want to happen again, instead of having 3 growing points, I want 4 growing points. The reason I want 4 is because every year I'm going to cut out 2 of the growing branches back down to the height that I want. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some cuttings. Now, it always hurts to take cuttings from a San Pedro variety, but if you promise someone cuttings, you got to do what you got to do. So here's a good size. I'm going to cut that off. And here's a good size. I'm going to cut that off. Okay, so I took off 2 cuttings and I shortened it here. Okay, but what I want now to happen is that when this tree grows next year and it breaks dormancy, I want these branches to branch out, okay, in 2 different permanent structure branches, 2 scaffolds, okay? So I already have 2 branches here, but I want 2 more. I want 2 here and 2 over here. And then once these 2 form and these 2 form, they'll grow straight up. straight up in the air. Okay, so I'll have 4 branches growing upwards. And those 4 branches, what I'll do is they'll fruit the next year for me, and then I'll cut back 2 of them all the way back down to here. So if the 2 branches form here and they get all the way up to, let's say they grow another foot that year, I'll cut them back down here again, and I'll leave these 2 at a foot high. Why am I doing that? Because these, I'll leave nodes here so that these can grow again. And then the following year, this side, I'll cut these back down to a couple nodes. Essentially, I'm just maintaining the height of my tree while getting a decent Breva production. So that's how you do it for Brevas. So on to the drawing. There was many of you that drew. I don't know exactly the amount, but I got here a hat. As you can see, a hat. And there's some paper in there with people's names on it. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to shake this up and I'm going to draw 5 names. I'm not going to look. So, alright, so I shook it. Alright, first name, I'm feeling around for a little bit. First name off the top, Jeffrey. Jeffrey, you're a winner. Alright, we got 1. Shake it up again. Actually, you know what? I'm just going to get 4 names. 1, 2, 3, and someone down the bottom. 4. Okay, how come I only have 2? Alright, so I just drew 2. Okay, so we got Christine. There's Christine. And we have Nika. Alright. This is becoming the longest drawing in history. Shaking it up, picking out 2 names. 2 names, we got 2 names. Okay, we got Gregory. And we have Candace. Okay, so we got our 5 names. So, again, just to reiterate who won. Thanks and congrats to the winners, by the way. Candace, Nika, Gregory, Jeffrey, and Christine. Alright, so congrats. Alright, so now I want to answer your guys' questions. Now that we know who the winners are, here at my computer, and this would be an easy way to do it. So, Candace said, "You always have great videos, very informative. Thanks for everything." That's awesome. Thank you, Candace. JRO, he said, "Thank you for recommending mountain figs." He really is a great seller. He's a great friend of mine. He sold me a lot of cuttings my first year of growing figs, and he just has really nice prices, and he really knows what he's doing when it comes to production. And taste, by the way. He's really good at, he sells a lot of his figs to chefs, so he has to describe the taste, and he's just really good at that, describing the flavors of figs. HBG Bill is considering a Harbor Freight greenhouse. In fact, many of you asked me about my greenhouse and wanted to see more about it. Maybe I'll make another video on it, but yeah, I mean, it's like I said before, it's a nice greenhouse if you're not planning on using it for the long term. It doesn't insulate very well, so if you need to heat it, it might cost you a little bit. When it comes to heating the greenhouse, people have been asking me how I'm heating it. Essentially, when it comes to fig trees, you want something that's not really going to dip below 32 degrees, because once the temperatures get below that, around like 26, like 20 to 26, you lose the Breva crops, the buds on the wood. The Breva crops form in the fall and in the wintertime, so you'll lose that. And then if it gets lower than like 20, 22-ish to like down to like 10, 15 degrees, even 10, you might be pushing it. Depending on how thick the wood is, you'll have dieback. And sometimes if it gets too low, the entire tree will die back to the ground. So I just want to keep my trees above 32. You want to keep them in between 32 and 45. That's like the sweet spot of keeping them dormant for as long as you can. Right now, my greenhouse is like being kept above 40. It's ranging from like 40 to 70. So I needed to get it colder in there during the nighttime, but as of right now, I'm not too worried about it. I would say in the next couple month or two, I'm really going to pay attention to it. Next week, I'm really going to try to fix the heating situation. So, but then really in March, I would say like early March in my area, maybe even early April at the latest, I want all of my trees to be awake. So from now until March, I really want my trees to be dormant, and then I want them to wake up. And that's just going to give me an early start to the season, which is really important for someone in my area. In regards to keeping the heater in the corner, that's just where I could easily hang it for now. Definitely should be somewhere in the middle. And in fact, something that no one has really talked about on the comments is that you really need a heater, not a heater, a fan. The fan does a really nice job of circulating the heat, and not only that, but it kind of keeps the humidity down in there. Too much humidity at one time for a long period of time is gonna make the greenhouse moldy, which is really not what I want. Jeffrey, you should definitely get a greenhouse, man. I totally recommend it. It's just nice to have some place to store my trees other than inside my house. So it's nice for that, and then I'm sure at some point I can do other things with it in the fall. I can extend my season in the fall, definitely put some trees in there. Jim asked, is the greenhouse anchored to the ground at all? Or is the wood frame on the bottom holding it down? We rebarred in the wood framing. The very bottom panel, the flat pieces of the wood, the very bottom of it, if you go back to the video and check, they're about 4 inches, they're 4 inches wide and 4 inches high. Those are rebarred in the ground, and then you have some brackets holding in the upper piece of wood to the bottom piece of wood, and then you have inside the greenhouse you have some 2x2s adding some extra support to attach the wood to the bottom piece, and then you also have the aluminum frame completely caulked to the wood frame. And then not only that, but I have some pretty heavy-duty screws that we screwed into the aluminum frame into the wood with some washers as well. And the washers are a nice key thing there because it adds some extra support. There's a lot of videos on Harbor Freight greenhouses that I would definitely recommend you look at if you're thinking about building one of these things. Save the best for last. Christine is apparently my biggest fan. I don't know if you guys can see this. See if you guys can see this post here, but it's very long. She knows it's very long, but essentially, Christine tells me that she's growing in my area in Lansdowne, Pennsylvania. That's pretty close to me, and she tells me that she grows bananas and citrus trees and all kinds of tropical things. And she's really excited to have someone in her area that she can grow with or get advice from about subtropicals in Pennsylvania. And you won too. She's really happy. She was really happy to have a chance to win, and she won. So, Christine, congrats. What I will say is that to answer your questions about the subtropicals and stuff like that in Pennsylvania, anything I can grow here that's I think is tasty. I think bananas are great, especially if you can grow them yourself. A lot of people have said that the bananas are better in if you grow them yourself versus if you get them in the store. But I have bad news for you. People have told me it's impossible, or it's just really not worth it. if it is possible. I'm sure it's possible. Okay, it is possible, but they gave me the feeling that it would take a long time to get those bananas, for like 3 years or something. Same thing with avocados, is that I really wanted to do avocados and bananas, but without a greenhouse that's heated all wintertime, that's huge too. You need a really tall greenhouse for bananas. Avocado trees get really large, so you need a pretty large greenhouse for this, and it has to be heated. Show me some pictures. You never know. I would love to see you successfully fruit a dwarf Cavendish banana. That'd be awesome. So send me some pictures and definitely keep me updated on what you're doing, because if I can grow bananas myself, I'm definitely going to want to do that. So yeah, that's it for the questions. Thanks to everybody that has been so supportive, and I hope you guys enjoyed the pruning lesson. And if you guys have any more questions, please feel free to ask. I'll definitely try to answer your questions the best I can. So yeah, and congrats to the winners. So if you won, by the way, send me your address in a private message any way you can, either through YouTube. I'm not sure if you can message people through YouTube. I haven't figured that out yet. But either through YouTube or on one of the forums I'm a part of. I'm part of growingfruit.org and ourfigs.com. Those are two really great sources for learning how to grow fruit. I'm also a part of a couple Facebook groups in growing figs as well. So if you can find me on Facebook, don't be afraid to add me or send me a message. And yeah, and congrats to the winners. Hope you guys have a nice night and a happy new year. And yeah, peace out.